What's going on, everyone? We hope you had a nice and relaxing weekend because we have a lot to cover and talk about for the stock market this week. On Friday, 65% of stocks in the S&P 500 closed up in the green. And while that's awesome, we have some very important economic events scheduled for this week, like the Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, which will happen this Friday. And this event has been a major event over recent years when it comes to market movement and opportunities. As this is happening, gold prices are making brand new record highs and moving to the upside with some serious power and just momentum behind them. But we have a lot to talk about today. There's a lot of things starting to move in some pretty opportunity-filled ways in the market right now. So make sure to stick with us all the way into the end. But besides that, Tom, let's jump right into it.
Yeah, the SPY was pretty good once again on Friday. From open to close, it had a pretty good jump to the upside. I know that the overall percentage doesn't look like the best, but whenever we look at the week as a whole last week, from Monday to Friday, the SPY had a really good move. You know, it pretty much moved from like 533 all the way up towards 555, which is a pretty major resistance to keep in mind here in the short term. And, you know, what else did we see move on Friday, Mike? You know, we did see a couple tech stocks. Looking at the heat map, there were a few tech stocks up in the green, but you know, the sector that really killed it Friday was gold. And whenever I go and I start to look at GLD, I mean, you can really see the breakout on an intraday chart, but you even go to a daily chart and it starts to look even better. And you can see the big money entered a play back on August 6th with the 223 calls for September 20th, and those are up a ton right now, Mike. They pretty much sniped the bottom, and those calls are still running. And like I said, GLD is a new all-time highs. And, you know, whenever we see gold at highs like this, I don't know about you, Mike, but I always start to think a bit of fears creeping in the market.
Yeah, and when you have gold prices running, it can say a lot of things because a lot of investors resort to gold in times of fear and just uncertainty. But another key thing to keep in mind is that we have rate cuts coming up here pretty soon. As we can see by looking at this chart, historically speaking, whenever the Fed has cut rates, at least in recent times, gold has benefited from that quite a bit. We could see like from like 2008 and onwards, during that massive rate cut cycle, gold had a lot to benefit from that. But even if you go closer to COVID times, when there was a massive rate cut there, gold also benefited quite a bit from that. And now what we're starting to see is we have rate cuts priced in starting in September, actually about a month out right now, and we're already seeing gold move up ahead of that. So it looks like investors have recognized the recent way in which gold responds to rate cuts. And like, even if you wanted to go back like further than the two major recent examples that we looked at with COVID and the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009, even when you go back to like the dot-com era, when there was a big rate cut cycle there, gold has also benefited a lot from that. And what you see is a lot of times during when rates are cut, you see a bunch of money that's just sitting on the sidelines, not really being deployed right now, just earning that sweet, 5% interest from the government. Realize that, as interest rates come down, that rate will go from like 5% to 4% to 3% to maybe 2% or maybe even lower. And the investors who were once earning, let's say 5% risk-free interest rates say, you know what, I don't want a 2% return. That sucks. So I'm going to buy gold instead. And, that's part of the many reasons gold moves up during rate cut cycles. But either way, this gold rally is starting to get pretty exciting.
It is, and I know a lot of people talk about central banks adding gold and etc., especially in recent years. It's been a little bit more accelerated, so I think that's pretty interesting, and it's just good to see gold, in my opinion, moving up, Mike. A lot of people hold this. I know lots of people out there like to buy physical gold as well. Of course, lots of people trade it with ETFs and futures and different matters like that, but a lot of people also buy it in the forms of coins, even necklaces and stuff like that sometimes. Obviously, it's jewelry. You're not necessarily looking for it to go up in price, but it's always good when it does, right? So nonetheless, though, I know that gold's something people really look at, especially during times of fear. And I don't know about you, Mike, but we have these elections coming up in November too. And combined with the Middle East and then what's going on in Ukraine still, I mean, we're at a pretty weird time in the world right now, and I think that gold prices are shooting up as people are a little bit worried. But you know what? I will say this though: the market has been pretty resilient as well, and we've continued to see SPY move up at the same time. So it's not like we're necessarily seeing like a massive sell-off or anything like that while gold makes new highs. But SPY has been pulling back over the past couple months, but in the short term, it's been ripping back.
No doubt, but like you mentioned, whether you factor in the tensions in the Middle East, or you could just say the general fears across the world right now as we have a crucial election upcoming, or many other reasons, there are a lot of reasons to justify going into a safe haven asset like gold, and I think we're already seeing that done on a large scale, not only demonstrated by the recent breakout in gold, but just the uptrend with gold over the past year. So I think it says a lot about how people feel right now. And like you said, it's not like we're seeing widespread panic across the entire market, because the market itself isn't that far away from its own all-time high. But keep a close eye on gold going forward, as there are a lot of things moving this. GLD is a great way to follow gold prices. It is one of the most liquid gold ETFs out there, which have very liquid options as well. But you could even look at GDX, which is basically gold mining companies. And if you wanted to get into like specific gold mining companies, you could look at like ticker symbol NEM or AEM, or even you could say GOLD, which is Barrick Gold. There are many ways to play a move like this. And then even some people will look at silver, which is SLV, which can sometimes have even more crazy moves than gold, depending on the market at the time.
Yeah, like gold's making new all-time highs, and like you look at silver and it's coming up off the dip, but as we know, silver is only $26 an ounce, right? So whenever it moves a few dollars, it's a much more significant amount. Like let's say silver tests recent highs, that'll be like an 8 to 10% move. So that's a pretty respectable move out of something, people consider like, something more of like a safe haven asset. So I love that with gold, Mike, and gold is something that people really like to turn to during these times. So I'm not surprised to see it running. And in the short term, people might ask themselves, well, hey, is it too late? Is this rally over? Personally, I don't think so. I really love how on the daily we just broke out above resistance, and I would look for it to keep running. That doesn't mean that it's going to go up on Monday, but over the next week to 2 weeks, I could see a lot more bullishness coming in.
Yeah, so either way, keep a close eye on gold going forward, but the market itself is still doing pretty well, like you alluded to earlier in the video. 2024 has actually been one of the best, like you could say, starts to the stock market in a long time. I know we're past the halfway point, or a decent amount past it, but basically looking at this data here, we can see from the first to the 158th trading day of the year, we are currently up 16.4%. This is one of the best, segments that the market has had throughout history, and based off the historical data, strength tends to beget even more strength. We can see all of these other times when the stock market had a good initial move higher, it normally continues that strength and closes the year strong. However, there have been a handful of events that certainly stand out throughout history. Like, if we start closer towards the top end of the list with 1933 and 1987, those had rough, second parts of the year, but even, of course, 1929 and a couple other years. But the main thing to know is that the market has been pretty strong, and at least based off historical data, strength tends to beget even more strength.
Yeah, it's cool to see, and I know that on here there's only one other year that's an election year, like 1936, but it is a bit of a weird year here, guys. We got to keep that in mind between the prospect of the rate cuts, all the geopolitical tensions that we've been talking about with gold and etc. And then, of course, we just have everything going on, like I said, with Powell, the rate cuts. Our economy is pretty rough right now. A lot of people are, credit card delinquencies are on the rise, unemployment's shooting up a bit. Sometimes we see that lead into recession. Most of the time we do, but there's a lot of stuff that kind of points to it kind of going down right now, but traders are loving it, Mike. We just keep seeing these big tech stocks like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, SMCI, ARM, and others being bought up here in the short term, and it's good to see this recovery over the past week as well. It's really showing how strong the market is and has been this year.
And another thing to keep in mind is that we can look at longer term data points like the unemployment rate and, rate cuts and inflation, all this stuff. And sometimes in the short term, the stock market can do like stupid, irrational things that just don't make sense. And what's worth keeping in mind is that while the stock market can do crazy things in the short term, you kind of have to expect that craziness and be willing to adapt with it. Because, again, sometimes the stock market just moves in irrational ways in the short term. But another thing we have to talk about for this week is the big Jackson Hole Symposium. So this is going to be the most important event of the week. The big man, Jerome Powell, is coming back. And for those of you who don't know, the Jackson Hole event is going to be on Friday, or at least that's when Powell speaks, I should say. And it's going to be very important because essentially it is when central bankers all around the world get together in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and talk about the economy and the world at the time, and I guess you could say think clear about how they will all manage this economic situation. As we all know, when Jerome Powell speaks, it's very important to listen up because he has such an enormous influence on the market and economy as a whole. This event in recent years has been extremely important. 2 years ago, Jerome Powell came out firing at this economic event on August 26th of 2022 and sent the market into like a pretty big spiral. Normally, we think of Jerome Powell as someone who, smooth talks the market and does a pretty good job overall, as we could see at the stock market's performance over recent years. But again, 2 years ago at this event, Jerome Powell came out firing, and ever since that point, Jackson Hole events have been one that many traders pay attention to for obvious reasons.
Yeah, like anytime I think of Jackson Hole and I saw the headlines this week, I immediately thought right back to 2022. And I was like, wow, a couple years ago, that really was a bad day, I remember. And, a lot of people kind of mark that as like what really started to kick off that overall downtrend there in 2022. Not the overall trend of the whole year, but as you can see, 2022 was a pretty choppy year for the market. It ended up kicking off that good downtrend there on the daily for those ending couple months there. But overall, I mean, it's going to be a big time. Whenever Jerome Powell speaks, it's going to be a big event. And Jackson Hole, a lot of people put on their conspiracy theory hats for this. Mike, I can't wait to read the comments tonight. People are like thinking like, wow, like what do they collude about? Whenever people aren't seeing what they're talking about and, et cetera in the background. So it'll definitely be a pretty big event. Hopefully Powell, honestly, I hope he stirs up the pot a bit, right? I want to see some more volatility, Mike. Let's see the VIX pop up a little bit. Let's see some options pricing start to go crazy, create some good opportunities this week.
There we go. I think we're going to have some good opportunities this week, especially when it comes to crazy moves. But as we look at the economic calendar, really the only major events are the Jackson Hole event on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then the FOMC Minutes event on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So keep those two events open for your calendar. And then looking at the earnings lineup for the week, we do have a handful of exciting stocks. We have PANW on a Monday after close. Don't forget Nancy Pelosi was bullish on this one. And then as we look throughout the week, there are a couple of big other reports. I would say Zoom on Wednesday after close will be one that is exciting as well. And then on Thursday, we have like Baidu, Peloton, and a handful of other ones. But this earnings week isn't like the craziest by any means, but I think we have a couple good stocks that'll offer some pretty good moves and also just some interesting earnings reports like Zoom. They've been reporting like fine revenue, but they just haven't been like truly growing, which I guess you can say is somewhat expected. But the stock is at such a beaten down point. Even if they offer good guidance, that can change the sentiment with this one.
Yeah, I mean, this stock's so low in the short term, Mike. It's actually riding like a trend to the downside. It's bouncing off support in the short term around $55 to $56. And, if it starts to break under this support and like these earnings are negative, it's going to be a pretty bad thing for Zoom shareholders in the short term. That's for sure. But that's going to be a big report for them. They're a growth stock. And just the reports this week, like you said, aren't crazy, but there are some interesting stocks, like even XPEV, like a Chinese EV company. Some of those companies can be pretty interesting and move quite a bit as well. And, Peloton's one that you mentioned that I thought could also be interesting. They're another one of those growth stocks that if they do have a decent report, they could start to turn things around in the short term. They are also on support, just like Zoom is.
Sounds good. All right. Well, with that being said, let's jump right into some of the SPY levels and analysis for tomorrow. SPY has been in an amazing uptrend over the past couple of weeks, and we're getting closer and closer to that all-time high, Tom. We haven't said this in a little bit now. So what are the key levels for SPY upcoming?
Yeah, it's so weird. I have to scroll back so far that, it starts to scrunch up on the chart so much to truly show the significance of these levels. But looking here in the short term, 554 to 555, which is the high from Friday, is going to be very important to watch. This was actually a huge resistance from the very beginning of August where we started rejecting back down. And we also saw bounces off of this level in the past as well. So just keep your eyes on this resistance very closely. We need to see a good break of this. Past this, I'm watching 556.80, 558, 560, 562, and then we'll be hitting the all-time high right around 564 and 565. If we break there this week, Mike, the bulls will be celebrating, but that's what I'm watching to the upside. For supports, there were a lot of levels that we passed up last week, which are going to now act as short-term supports. So 550 is going to be pretty huge. That was the low from pre-market Friday, as well as 544 and 542 underneath there.
Sounds great. All right, well, we are all set and clear for some setups and predictions then. A stock I'm watching very closely is NEM, and it is to the upside. This is a gold mining company, and we already talked about gold enough, so we won't get into that. But basically, NEM has been uptrending in a strong way. Gold prices rising definitely helps out a mining company like this one. They're getting closer and closer to recent resistance, just under that $51 level. The stock has been extremely consistent with its move higher. It's making higher lows, and I really like the reward to risk playing this one to the upside, not only just with the short-term momentum with gold, but also with a medium-term play over these next couple months as rate cuts start to kick in, as well as just gold prices continue to develop. So NEM is on my upside radar, not just for the short term, but also the medium term, so the next couple months.
Yeah, I love it. These miners could be pretty significant as well. With gold, you're chasing new all-time highs. A lot of these miners, they're still fairly low, in the grand scheme of things. And I think they have a long ways to go. And as long as gold prices stay elevated, they should be pretty good. With my first play, I'm looking at Palantir here in the short term. They've just continued to kill it. On Friday, they broke above resistance again around 31.50 from Thursday and just continued to rip. So I'll be looking for a break of that high of day around 32.80 with them. If they break that, I'll look for a continuation. Let's just go look at that daily chart really quick, because it's just so good in the short term, Mike. There has been some volatility over the past couple of months, with the overall market dropping, but with this recovery, it's making new recent highs once again.
I love to see it. This is a long-term holding of mine, so it's great to see Palantir showing some good strength. Another stock I'm watching pretty closely is JD, and it is to the upside. This is a Chinese stock that has shown a lot of great strength in the short term. Stocks like this one have been beaten down in a really bad way over the past couple of years, and they're finally seeing some daylight. JD was up over 8% on Friday alone, and they reported earnings last week, and just a lot of stocks like this one are starting to get some good inflows, which is good to see, and they offer some pretty good opportunities in the short term, because when these stocks move up, they tend to move up in a crazy and powerful way. So JD is definitely on my upside radar going forward, and stick around for today's big money play to see more on why that is.
Yeah, the China stocks did great Friday. From opening on Friday to close, I thought the China stocks were actually the best sector to trade. You see JD, that was a great pop there, 4.5%. I know it was 8% on the day, but even from open to close, really, really good move. And I know that these gap up a lot as well. But with my next stock, I'm looking at GLD. And Mike, you said it best. We've already talked about gold quite a bit, but with the way it's continuing on the daily chart, I love the breakout of that little channel it was in and that break of that 230 resistance. So if we're able to see a good move above 232, I will keep watching it back up. Of course, it's already above 232 in after hours from Friday. So, give or take a little bit here. Like if we end up opening up around 233, then make it break there. The main thing is that you want to see that good momentum that we saw Friday. For I would say the majority of the day Friday, we saw a lot of good momentum to the upside as it pushed new highs, and that's really what you want to catch is that type of momentum there. If we open up and we start to see a big drop off or something like that, then just keep it on the radar and wait maybe for a better move later in the day.
Sounds great. All right, well, it's now about that time for today's momentum plays. And with the first one, we have NVIDIA to the upside.
NVDA, very nice move on Friday. If they end up breaking 125, then watch for the breakout there. And 125 was pretty significant overall in the past. And you can see on Bookmap here, it is a major level for this stock around close. I saw something like 744,000 shares stacked at 125. And that number might have been even closer to 1 million at some points in the day there. But that is a major level. It even tried to break out above that on Friday early in the morning, and it got rejected right back down. So if we end up breaking 125 with NVIDIA, watch for the uptrend to continue. That'll be a major resistance to break through. And shout out to Bookmap as always for these awesome levels here.
You gotta love it. Yeah, there's a wall of sellers right there at 125. So definitely keep that level in mind. With the next one, we have Pfizer to the downside.
Ticker symbol PFE. If they end up breaking down below $28 even, then keep watching them down. They saw a pretty big sell-off Friday.
All right, and then with the last one, we have QQQ for both directions.
Yeah, we saw QQQ in both directions last week, and it just really retested resistance. So if it's able to break above 476.50, which is pretty major resistance, then watch it up. I would not be surprised if the market continued ripping up in the short term with all these tech stocks moving. If we do see a rejection, which, the SPY and the QQQ they're both at pretty major resistances. If we do see a rejection and a drop below the 470 mark, then watch it back down.
Sounds good. So we have that downside level for a potential move lower. We have the upside level for a potential move higher, and this is with QQQ. Don't forget about the levels with Pfizer and NVIDIA as well. But these three stocks are on watch for potential momentum plays only if they break through the levels Tom listed. The stronger they move and the more consistent they move, the better the setups become. So keep them close on watch for potential day trade style setups tomorrow. But it's now about that time for today's $777,000 big money trade. And we are jumping right back to ticker symbol JD. The big money on Friday put over, I guess you could say just under $800,000 into some JD call options at the 30 strike for the October 18th of 2024 expiration. JD is showing a lot of strength right now. Again, they just reported earnings. The big money is getting bullish on this one as they bought options that are slightly out of the money that have some time to them, and the reward to risk situation in a setup like this one is definitely tempting, and there is a lot of reward in a situation like this, but at the same time, increased risk naturally comes to a Chinese stock like JD. It's extremely volatile, and it moves in ways that are different than most American stocks. This doesn't necessarily ultimately make it a bad thing. It's just worth understanding that the risks are different and they move in more volatile ways. But again, that does help when when the moves are to the upside, because they get pretty crazy pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I really like that move from Friday. There was a lot of bullishness with those China stocks and their earnings last week. And whenever these stocks start to go on uptrends, they go on some pretty good overall moves, right? There's a lot of, I would say, volatility mixed in the short term, even on a lot of these uptrends. You'll have days where, you wake up and the stock starts gapping down, but then, 2 weeks later, it breaks out to new all-time highs, right? There's going to be that volatility mixed in. So if you do trade this, just keep that in mind. But overall, I love this big money play. It's the 30 strike, which is pretty close to the money, especially where we close Friday. And it'd be really nice to see a breakout of 30 and then like retest of like 32 to 35 in the short term, like over the next month to 2 months, by the expiration here. But it's a lucky number too, Mike. One time we had somebody make a play with 666,000. It scared me a bit. At least we got the lucky sevens going on this one.
Awesome. So either way, keep a close eye on JD going forward. The big money is getting bullish on this one, so keep it close on watch. But as we look at everything for the week, Tom, I am pretty excited. We have the Jackson Hole event coming up for the week. This can bring upon some great moves and a lot of craziness, which is the great thing for short-term trading. At the same time, gold is starting to rip higher, which is something that we haven't seen in a little while. And the market's even getting closer to all-time highs yet again. So I think we're going to have a lot of great opportunities this week. Let's continue to practice smart, long-term oriented trading habits. Let's trade in a smart, risk-protected way. Let's follow the money. Let's have stop losses. Let's respect our stop losses. And let's just have a great trading week all around. There should be some good moves in both directions. And remember to adapt and I guess you could say adapt and be willing to change with the market. Sometimes the market does crazy things in the short term. Those who adapt do the best. But before we close out, we have to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day. New to Mo in the StockedUp Discord. You've been a member of the community for over 4 years at this point, and you're still very active and positive to this day. So huge shout out to you and keep up all of the great work. It's awesome having you in the community. So huge shout out to New to Mo. If you guys are new to the YouTube channel, consider obliterating that subscribe button to get our videos recommended to you more often. In every single video, we cover the most important news, information, events, and things to be aware of in the market. We also show charts that you'd probably never otherwise see and show big money trades that you would have never otherwise seen. So definitely consider destroying that subscribe button to get our videos recommended to you more often. We're set for a pretty exciting week, so I hope you guys are as excited as we are. If you guys have not already tried out Bookmap, definitely check it out. It'll be that first link in the description in the comments down below. They're a phenomenal tool to have on your side during market I guess you could say situations like this one. They show you exactly where the buy orders and sell orders are lined up. As Tom showed earlier in the video, we could just pull up any ticker, in this case NVIDIA, and see exactly where the massive sell walls are at, so we can know the best breakout levels and even spots to take profits on before the stock even gets to that point. If you guys want to try it out, if you use the link down below, you will save, because a special offers icon pops up if you use that link. So definitely check it out. It's really awesome. And besides that, thank you all so much for watching, and let's have an amazing week in the market.